What's up, everybody? Happy Friday, and welcome to another edition of Believe in White Sox. We are back on the video stream. I've got a new audio mixer. We're trying it out with a little bit of a different audio setting, so please give me some feedback on how this sounds. I think this actually sounds pretty good. My old audio mixer was from the 1980s or 1990s, and I actually had a full episode recorded, and then everything just spit the bit. So we were not able to use that. That's why the trade deadline episode came from my phone and we didn't have any video, but we've got our new mixer. For those of you wondering that watch on video, my actual high quality microphone is out of view of the camera, so it actually looks like I am talking to you without a microphone, even though I do have a professional one. So hit like and subscribe on the YouTube page. Also, make sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, wherever you get your podcasts. So, with the White Sox in the midst of a 17-game losing streak, I wanted to just do a little bit of a by the numbers episode because at this point in time, I really don't know what there is to necessarily look forward to the rest of this season, given that a lot of the prospects that came back in return are guys that we're not going to see for quite some time. It's been a rough start for Miguel Vargas. He went 0 in the series against the Kansas City Royals. So hopefully, as the White Sox head to Minnesota tonight to open up a series against the Twins, that they're going to be a little bit better offensively. And offensively is where I want to talk about this team because I wanted to know, just simply because of the fact that you can say in absolutes, people talk in absolutes way too much. This is the worst baseball team of all time. This is the worst team I've ever seen. Well, what are some numbers that, at least from the offensive side of things, because I looked at some of the pitching numbers, and while the blown save totals are bad, the overall pitching numbers are not nearly as bad as where the White Sox have been historically. So I wanted to go through some numbers with you quickly, just to give you an idea in terms of where this team compares to recent awful teams of the past and to White Sox teams historically. So the White Sox have a negative 2.1 run differential per game, an overall run differential of negative 229 as we record this on a Friday afternoon. Believe it or not, it has not been a long time since that number has been achieved. That total was achieved last year by the Oakland A's, who went 50 and 112, and they also had a negative run differential of 2.1 per game. So, for those of you that are trying to understand what the math is on that, that means that the White Sox total result, win or loss, is an average of a loss by 2.1 runs per game. That is what the average of a negative 229 run differential at this point in the season with the White Sox 27 and 84 is doing. The White Sox, by the way, I should mention that the last team to do that negative run differential per game, meaning worse than 2 per game prior to this year, was a team also in the American League Central back in 2019, the Detroit Tigers, who were also at negative 2.1 run differential per game. And those Detroit Tigers went 47 and 114. The White Sox are currently hitting 218, which is tied with the Seattle Mariners for the worst batting average in Major League Baseball. 218 is the worst team batting average for the White Sox since 1910, when they hit 211 as a team, but there is no team average in a single season worse than 211. So this is the worst team batting average since 1910 and the second worst in team history. Now, it would be the worst in the live ball era. So basically, everything 1920 and earlier was known as the dead ball era. Everything around the 1910s, especially. You talk about the great nicknames like Frank Home Run Baker. Well, Frank Home Run Baker, I think his most homers in a total season was 6. So Frank Home Run Baker sure hit himself a lot of home runs back in his day. I'll tell you that much right now. But the lowest batting average of the post-dead ball era prior to this year was in 1967 when they hit 225. 1967 and 1968, The White Sox, I believe, were known as the hitless wonders. They had some good teams that pitched very well, but they didn't hit worth a lick. Their team on base percentage this season is 277, which is also the worst since 1910 and the second worst in franchise history. Their 620 OPS is on pace to be the third worst in the modern era, which is basically post dead ball era and post World War II, with the two worsts being 595 in 1968 and 612 in 1967. So you talk about the OPS numbers. The White Sox are they are a horrific team in terms of power. Luis Robert Jr. leads all active players in home runs right now with 14. The team leader in home runs was traded away, Paul DeYoung. He had 18 at the time that he was dealt to the Royals. It would be the second time in the last two seasons, and I didn't go back any further than this because I think it kind of emphasizes the point of the White Sox offensive philosophy, whether it be under this managerial regime, the Tony La Russa regime. I think that the Rick Renteria regime and prior regimes, home runs were a big part of White Sox culture. It would be the second time in the last three seasons that the White Sox didn't have a player hit 20 homers. And I'm not including 2020 in that, although I didn't look it up, but I did think that Jose Abreu hit 20 homers that season. I'm actually going to look that up right now because I want to be absolutely sure. Because if Jose Abreu did hit 20 homers in that shortened season of 2020, then it just makes that stat even worse. And Abreu hit 19 homers. So, point remains, though, is that not having a 20 homer guy is extremely embarrassing. And I don't believe with 2 months left in the year that Luis Robert Jr. at 14 homers, I don't think he's going to get to 20 homers. I don't see it happening. Then you talk about just the overall losses for this team. The White Sox are on pace to lose 100 games in consecutive seasons for the first time in franchise history. They're 27-84 as we record this, and with 2 full months left, I do not think that 100 losses is going to come in September. It's going to come sometime before the end of August. Now, they're going to have this losing streak be broken eventually, but I still think that they're going to end up with 100 losses. I mean, you think about the amount of games that you play in the month of August. I think with the off days that are built in, they're probably playing like 25 games in the month of August. So I think it's well inside the realm of possibility that the White Sox end up at 100 losses before the calendar turns to September. I hope it does not for the sake of dubious records, but there is a very good chance that it does. The White Sox have not blown saves, but the White Sox have blown 41 leads this season. At any point in the game, they have blown 41 leads. There is not a single other team in Major League Baseball that has 30 blown leads this year. And the White Sox also have 28 blown saves, which is more blown saves, either 27 or 28, more blown saves than they have wins. Whether it is 27 or 28, the point is that they have as many or more blown saves than they have wins. That I can guarantee. But the White Sox have only lost 100 games 6 times in franchise history, including this year. We're just assuming that they're going to get to 100 losses. 3 of their 6 100-loss seasons will have all been in the last 7 years, or 7 seasons, I should say. That's 2018, 2023, and 2024. So 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. That's 7 seasons. 3 100-loss years since 2018. That just tells you that this franchise, despite the rebound in 2020 and 2021, that this franchise structurally is not built correctly. The White Sox franchise record for losses is 106 back in 1970. They're going to obliterate that this year. The White Sox are the only team in Major League Baseball this season to have a losing streak of more than 10 games. And they've done it twice. It was funny when I was talking with our great community director, Cam Rogers, when we were first launching this show. I'm telling him about things I'm going to talk about. And he brought up, well, you can certainly talk about the losing streak. And he was referring to the then franchise record 14-game losing streak that was set in late May that has now been broken. Somebody actually looked this up. I can't remember where it was that I heard this. I think it was on the Bernstein and Holmes show on Chicago's 670 The Score radio station. That if you took out the White Sox 3-23 start, so that's 20 games under, and you took out each of the last two losing streaks, which in total, if you add those three stretches of games together, you end up at 51 games under 500. If you take out all of those games, the White Sox still have a losing record because they are currently 57 games under 500. The White Sox, without those stretches, would still be 6 games under 500. That's how bad this team is. The White Sox are an organization that are going to end up at the 120 loss mark, which will obliterate their previous single season record for losses. It's pathetic to the point of misery, and I don't want to be the negative guy. I have continued to say on this pod that I am not going to be the negative guy. That's not my shtick. That's not my MO. That's not how I like to do business. But at the same time, you have to acknowledge that Chris Getz took over this team as the GM toward the end of last year after the White Sox had axed both Kenny Williams and Rick Hahn, two guys that had been in the organization for a long, long time. And Chris Getz says in the GM meetings during the offseason that I don't like our team. So what did he do? He made the team worse. And you think about some of the returns. And somebody brought this point up to me. The return that the Marlins got from the Padres for Tanner Scott, I believe 2 top 10 prospects and a top 15 prospect, was significantly better than the return that the White Sox got from the Padres for Dylan Cease. A reliever, mid-season, got a better return than a guy that finished second in AL Cy Young voting 2 years prior. What is wrong with that? If you want to talk about the fact that this team needed to be rebuilt and restructured and blown up, fine. I get that. But I think it's become pretty clear, and we'll talk about it a little bit in our second segment, which will not be a long second segment today, I promise you that. The White Sox sold low on Dylan Cease, and I think it took the Eric Fetty, Tommy Pham, Michael Kopech trade, along with viewing that trade that the Padres gave to the Marlins. And you can even think about the Juan Soto trade initially that brought Soto to the Padres from the Nationals. You think about C.J. Abrams and Mackenzie Gore. Those guys are impact guys, and they were both high-level prospects that if they had stayed in the Padres organization would be playing at the major league level right now. Eric Fetty and Michael Kopech, at least Fetty based on his performance this year, as a 4.7 WAR player as a pitcher, is eons more valuable than Tanner Scott. And they got a minuscule return for him compared to what the Marlins got for Tanner Scott. To me, that shows that Chris Getz does not know how to leverage his other GMs and that he is drastically underqualified to rebuild this team. That to me is the crux of the issue here. You look at the returns that so many other teams got around Major League Baseball for prospects, or rather for Major League players that are having significantly worse seasons than Eric Fetty is. To me, that's unacceptable. And it's why the White Sox build toward their next competitive window may take a whole lot longer than what we have been hoping for. Going off of what we were talking about earlier in terms of returns, there was a report that came out this morning from Dan Hayes of MLB.com's Minnesota Twins beat. I think he's either MLB.com or The Athletic, but Dan Hayes covers the Twins. And the report said that the Twins had offered up their fifth overall prospect in Luke Keeschall, a second round pick from Arizona State last year, in exchange for Eric Fetty. Now, I don't know if that was the complete package, but the trade was rejected because the White Sox did not want to trade within the division. So here's what I will say to that. Luke Keeschall is the fifth ranked prospect in Minnesota's system by MLB Pipeline. Pipeline expects that he will be Major League ready by 2026. This season in Double-A Wichita, he is hitting. Why does Baseball Savant make this so difficult to find? I pull up one stats page. There we go. See, I'm just going to say that we're going to go with his overall stats split between high A Cedar Rapids, which is 44 games, and Double-A Wichita, which is 52 games. So over 96 games, he's hitting .315 with a .430 on base percentage and a .497 slug. 14 homers, 46 runs batted in 356 at-bats. Last season, split between three teams over 31 games his draft year, .288 average with 3 homers and 15 RBI, with a .414 on base percentage, over 140 plate appearances, 111 at-bats. This is a guy, again, as we've preached, the White Sox need middle infielders. I saw this guy play at Arizona State and at the University of San Francisco. He can play second, he can play short, he can play third. The White Sox are lacking middle infield depth, and even after the trade from the Dodgers, you get Alex Albertus and Joral Perez, you don't have anybody that's near being big league ready like Luke Keeschall is. But the reason is that they didn't want to trade within the division. Now, under normal circumstances, I would understand why you don't want to trade within the division. But the White Sox are nowhere close to being competitive. And Eric Fetty is not a guy that's going to get a second contract with the Twins. The Twins' competitive window, given the age of Carlos Correa, given the injury history of Byron Buxton, given that you're probably not going to be able to keep a rotation with Pablo Lopez and Joe Ryan together forever, because Ryan at some point is going to get paid. Lopez has already been paid. And considering that the Tigers are on the up, the Royals are certainly on the up, more on the up than the Tigers are. I think the Tigers are still a couple of years away from competing, but they will be competitive in the next few years. And the Cleveland Guardians, who are in a window where they can win the World Series because their pitching is that good, and Jose Ramirez is the most clutch player in Major League Baseball. The White Sox are nowhere near where the Twins are. And they won't be anywhere near where the Twins are while Eric Fetty is still under contract. Why wouldn't you take a guy that can help your organization long term for a guy that wouldn't be on your team when you're competitive? I don't get that logic. Luke Keeschall would have been a better return than anybody that they got in the Dodger trade, except for Miguel Vargas. And right now, Vargas is struggling to adjust, granted only a few games. But point being, when you're as bad as the White Sox are, and you're trading somebody that is not a part of your long-term future, Eric Fetty was drafted in 2014. It's not like he is going to be a cornerstone of your rotation in 2026 or 27. Eric Fetty was signed for the sole purpose of giving a somewhat competitive arm at a low average annual value. That to me is why you signed him. So I don't necessarily understand why the White Sox rejected this deal, but they decided to do it. And I think if Luke Keyshaw ends up playing in the big successfully with the Twins by the start of the 2026 season, I think there's going to be a lot of regret, as there very well should be. And then finally, the last thing I want to touch on with today's show is that a report also came out from the Washington Post that the White Sox actually sent the Baltimore Orioles $4 million to take Eloy Jimenez. So they subsidized basically about half of the remaining contract this year. He's got team options for next year and the year after, which I don't think are going to get picked up by Baltimore. And I saw a tweet from Jacob Calvin Meyer, who covers the Orioles for the Baltimore Sun, that, and this is the tweet, Brandon Hyde said that Eloy Jimenez is not 100% physically. He was on the injured list earlier this season with a hamstring injury. If he gets back to 100%, it's possible he sees limited time in the outfield, but Hyde expects Jimenez to mostly DH and be a pinch hitter. Well, here's my philosophy at this point. Were you that desperate to get rid of Eloy to where you'd give up $4 million? Maybe you were. But if that's the case, if you're giving up $4 million, you should have gotten a better prospect than what the White Sox got back in return. Now, McGough is a more major league ready prospect than anybody else that the White Sox got, with the exception of Miguel Vargas. But is he worth $4 million? Probably not. So if he turns into something significant, then maybe that $4 million was worth it. But I think it just goes to show that the White Sox were desperate enough to get rid of Eloy that they would take on some of the remaining money on his contract this year. What a sad state of affairs we've gotten into, White Sox fans. And that is going to wrap it up on today's show. A couple of things that I do want to bring to your attention in terms of coverage plans. We will go and record a show depending upon where I'm at that day. I think that there is going to be a managerial move made at some point this month. I cannot imagine that Pedro Grifol continues to manage this club into September, especially if this losing streak reaches 20. So expect a managerial change show, and then I want to get somebody on that covers Dodger prospects to see if they have any insight into Perez or Alexander. And really, I wanted to get a lot of prospect people on, but there were so few returns on a lot of the guys that came to the White Sox that I don't even know if there's that much in-depth research on some of these guys that are not high in other systems and do not have an established track record at this point. But we will see who we can get on. Also, want to make note that since we are based here in the Bay Area, the White Sox are at the Oakland Coliseum next week. I am hoping, potentially, to do part of a show from the stands at the Oakland Coliseum, which will be my final game at the Oakland Coliseum before the A's move to Sacramento. So that's it. That's all. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Hit like, hit subscribe, all of the things that you do to make this show go, go, go. Have a great weekend, everybody. We will talk to you after the Twins series and preview a series against the Oakland Athletics that maybe the White Sox can win a few, and hopefully by the next time that we talk to you, the White Sox have a winning streak of some form and their losing streak has ended.